What is diversity? What is diversity? What is diversity? What is diversity? What is spirituality? Spirituality. Spirituality. How do they divert? How do they divert? How do they convert? How do they convert? How are we different? How are we different? How are we different? How are we the same? How are we the same? How are we the same? What is diversity? What is diversity? What is spirituality? This is Angelo John Lewis for the Diversity and Spirituality Network, and today I'm privileged to interview Kamaria Powell, who's just written a book that's called What the Freak is Enlightenment. And you can substitute any word you want for the word freak. I'm using that because I want to keep my PG-13 rating.
Yes.
And I'll tell you a little bit about Kamaria. She was born and raised in the dynamic urban community of Boston, Massachusetts. She received her bachelor's in psychology at the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth, and went on to receive her master's degree in education at the University of Massachusetts in Boston. Following her postgraduate studies, she began teaching in the Boston public schools. And to give you just a little bit of the flavor of her book before I introduce Kamaria and we start talking, I'm going to read a quote from you. I'm not a saint. I don't go to church every Sunday, and I curse like a sailor in my mind. My mother shows signs of schizophrenia, and my father is a recovering drug dealer. Yet, with these provocative things, I am profoundly attracted to everything spiritual. So that's from her book, What the Freak is Enlightenment. Kamaria, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I'm so happy to have this opportunity to speak with everyone.
You know, Kamaria, I want us to start out by maybe just giving people some baselines. Tell us a little bit about your spiritual religious upbringing.
So, I grew up in the church, had a very religious background. My mom was Pentecostal, so Christian Pentecostal. My grandmother was Methodist Christian. So I had a very religious background. I went to church every Sundays. Grown up Pentecostal, as some people may know, we go to church very often. So sometimes I go to church maybe 3-4 times a week. And so it was a little bit strict. It was pretty strict. There's a lot of things that I couldn't do or was frowned upon. But that was pretty much the religious part of my upbringing for a while.
So when you say Pentecostal, is that like speaking in tongues Pentecostal?
All of that, yes. Holy Spirit filled, just very strict and very, it definitely had the foundations of the Bible and sticking to the Bible and what the teachings of the Bible. And so, it was a good experience. There was some drawbacks to it, but I'd like to try to take positive from all of my experiences, no matter what.
So I get from your book that simply because you were raised in religion, that didn't give you all the answers that you're looking for. So
right.
I'm just wondering, what was it that made you search for answers beyond your traditional religious upbringing?
Well, my father, on the other hand, is very the opposite of religion. He's more of that spiritual side that I was able to also learn about through him. And so, he always made sure that I had a spiritual foundation, and he wasn't very judgmental. And so that kind of gave me the okay to do a little bit more exploring. And so while I was in college, being around, different cultures and different people, I felt more open to really explore what I believe. And so I started digging. I started reading, texts that I weren't traditionally raised on. And I found a lot of, inspiring things in it and empowering things. And so I decided to continue in that vein. And eventually it led me toward creating my own spiritual identity.
So let's talk about some of the landmarks that got you where you are. You told me about your father was a big influence on you and gave you, I guess, courage to pursue your own path. Can you tell me about some of the external landmarks that you may have gone through in order to maybe open you up to a different approach or a different view about spirituality?
Well, one thing that kind of got to me with religion is the judgmental part of it. And I felt like, there were times where I really didn't feel good about myself because, Pentecostals is like, it was always a matter of, are you doing the right thing or are you sinning? And it was just like, I was always finding myself wondering, like, am I sinful for, partaking in certain things? And so, that part didn't feel good. And so it was just a matter of, okay, exploring something beyond that, because I felt like there must have been more to the story. And so it was basically just me going and trying to discover that for myself. I think that our feelings are really, a lot of the times, they're guides to where we need to go. And so just seeing that, that part that was very judgmental against, people who were different than who I was, I didn't really like. I didn't really understand. I didn't see how that vibed with the message of Jesus. And so I just kind of took that and decided to explore. I love reading, and so text and books, spiritual books, was definitely a gateway for me.
So you did a lot of different things. You read a lot. In your book, you described going to a sweat lodge. You did a number of different things to basically just have a different view.
Yes. The sweat lodge, that came about a little bit later on in my life and my spiritual identity. But I decided to partake in that because I wanted to do this meditation retreat. And it really was just, I felt like I needed to give my spiritual side some one-on-one time. And so partaking in that meditation retreat where there was a sweat lodge, it was really very new, very eye-opening, and it was an empowering to me because I really felt like validated through that experience. It was great to be around people who were also open-minded. So I think finding your community, finding people who are as free spirited and free-minded as ours is also important too.
So, if it's not clear to everyone, Kamaria and I, we're both African Americans, or predominantly African American is how I like to put it. So, as you probably know, Kamaria, most of us in that group describe themselves as belonging to a particular religion. A lot of people have a stereotype of us most all being Baptist or something, or maybe Pentecostal also. But in this moment, how do you describe yourself?
I would definitely say I'm non-religious. I would say I'm spiritual. And that would probably be it. I believe in love. I believe in spirituality. I don't classify myself as a religion right now. I take from a lot of religions as far as like the value from a lot of different religions. I think that they all have something to offer, but to define myself as one specific religion, I don't necessarily ascribe to that. I think that everything can teach you something, and so I take that and run with it.
Now, as an African American woman, did you feel pressure in this kind of evolution that you have? I would imagine a lot of people that you grew up with come from a pretty traditional religious background. And here you are talking about all this other stuff. So I wonder, what was that like for you?
It was, it can be isolating to be different a little bit sometimes. So it's like, I think that there were times where it was kind of like I didn't want to share certain things. I was afraid to share that I thought a different way. And so that kind of hindered me from sharing my personal beliefs a lot of the times. I always listened. Like, I like to listen to everybody, but I didn't like to share. And so it took some time for me to get to that point where I was willing to share some of my personal beliefs with others, even like in this book. It took a lot of courage for me to write that because, like you said, it's definitely different in our culture, and that's okay, but it's definitely something that you have to kind of grow the muscle for and realize that your personal truth is worth sharing. It's important, and it's something that you should honor. And so I had to get to that point in honoring my truth. And a lot of it was written. It was writing, and it was expressing myself on paper rather than sharing it. When I wrote it down, it became true to me, and then I was able to share more of my beliefs with others. But it can be isolating. It can definitely be isolating.
What is your sense as to the positive and negative role that religion plays in the African American community?
Well, it goes back to the judgmental part of religion. I think that anytime that you are trying to almost force somebody into believing something, it can be that can be seen as a negative. It's definitely something that I think that our culture could face if you're not following the status quo. And so I think that the negative is definitely found in the judgment. It's one moment there it's like you kind of preach this non-judging, all loving, all accepting, and then the other flip side of that, you definitely see where it's like you almost feel like I said, that isolation, because you're not falling in the belief that everybody else is going. And it's also, a lot of it is fear too. I talk a lot about fear in the book What the F Is Enlightenment, because I think that fear keeps us from doing a lot of the things and expressing a lot of the things that we do. Even though 87% or more will classify, African Americans will classify themselves as a religion, are people questioning? Do they have the questions that most people have? Do they have, are they questioning their religions? I think that it happens. People do question things that they believe, but it's that fear that kind of keeps you of not pursuing that. It's like the fear of either hellfire or that you're going to be somehow punished is definitely a big part of it. And hopefully that'll change as culture changes.
Yeah, my experience is that it's changed a lot in my lifetime. I don't feel as, as you say, judged by other people. A lot of people I'm finding, a lot of people of color have, to some extent, some of the same experiences that I do.
Yeah, I think that you definitely can grow to that point. I think that it's something that, you have to, as culture is shifting, there is this more of a sense of openness to different beliefs and people, people who are just different from you. And so I think that thankfully the culture is shifting to that, but then there's still always that, what's been ingrained in you and I still, even now, like, even though I've written a book and I have all of my, my thoughts and beliefs out there in the open, sometimes I still feel like, oh, is that church friend going to read this? And are they going to be looking down on me and shaking their head in disgust? That voice is still in the back of my head. So it does take some overcoming, and I'm glad that the culture is shifting to be a more accepting one. But I do think we still have a lot of work to do.
Let's talk a little bit about the book itself, Kamaria. For me, one of the most moving parts of it is when you describe the process of asking questions to your higher self.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about what that process was like for you and perhaps a couple of examples.
So basically, ever since I was young, I always journaled. I always wrote in my diary. That was my way of expressing myself. And so a lot of the times when I had a question or something, rather than ask someone externally on how to get guidance from it, I'd write the question down and then I'd just start, thinking of answers, allowing myself to feel the answer, to understand that, I don't have to necessarily go to an outside person to try to figure out things in my life. I can try to, I can do that. I feel like I'm capable to do that. And a lot of it came from just writing it down and trusting the answer as it came, trusting myself that I am connected to a higher being. And so that information is within me, and that I don't have to go to an external source to find those answers. And so it's just a matter of, expressing yourself. And that could be through writing. It could be through other ways that you like to engage and express yourself. But for me, it was writing. It was writing down questions that I felt I needed answers to, and trusting myself that I had the answers within me.
So sort of like automatic writing in a way.
Yes.
I wonder if you could share a couple of the questions that you asked and some of the ones that maybe you were perplexed about and you got some answers through this process.
Some of the questions that I asked, for example, was, my parents. I talk a lot about, the history of having a mother with a mental illness and my father being, into drug dealing. And that for me was okay. I always felt a little bit different. And so it was like, okay, why do I have the parents that I do? Why was I born into this family? Sometimes you just ask that question because of what the circumstances may be around you. And so just by thoughtfully thinking about the value that I got from my dad and from my mother, it was really eye-opening to see how it all connected to what my purpose is now. And so just like, as for example, my father being incarcerated for so many years. Well, you look at the opposite of incarceration is like freedom. Okay, so how can I connect with freedom better because I saw my father's experience through incarceration, and just like writing down my ideas about that was really one of the more empowering questions. And as for my mother, who has a mental illness, she just thinking about what that meant to not be in touch with reality all the time, and how we can look at our world. Well, a lot of people would say the world is an illusion. So I think that it's almost like the way our world is designed. There's these cues that happen, or there's these things that are you're born into, and it's almost like a sign or a guidepost in a way. And I felt like with my mother's illness, it's almost as a reminder for me to remember, there is a true part of yourself, and then there's a part that's illusion, right? And so to remember the truest part of yourself, I see my mother as like a metaphor of that.
Say a little bit more about that. I mean, it seems like it's a big thing to have a mother that has mental illness that you have to deal with. I mean, did that have any impact on you in terms of your own spiritual evolution, I'll call it?
Yes, I mean, growing up, it was definitely difficult. I took a while to get to me to this point because like that, as I describe in my book, F Is Enlightenment, it was very challenging. It was something that I tried to hide a lot because I think with mental illness, there's a lot of shame around it. And I think that, having the mother that I had it's just like, understanding that even though it was challenging, I was able to grow from it, and seeing that all the beautiful aspects of her, despite her mental illness, was really empowering, and really helped to heal our relationship. Because as a teenager, and a mother with a mental illness, it's like very like you kind of just wish like, oh, why can't my family be normal, whatever normal is, right? And just going through, getting older and maturing and realizing her sacrifices and realizing how she was still able to raise 5 children on her own, while dealing with this mental illness. It was like it completely changed my perspective on her, and I was able to really value our relationship much more. And we still have a really good relationship now that I'm happy about.
So I wonder if you had to sum it up, what would you say the central message of your book that you would want readers to take away?
Definitely to find your spiritual identity, whatever that may be. I think that everyone's spiritual identity is going to be unique, which is kind of like the opposite of religion, as far as like religion teaches you that there's just like this one way to reach the divine or reach God and interact with God. And I think spirituality is the opposite. There are many ways we can interact with God. It's as unique as we are. And so whatever you enjoy doing, that's usually the connecting piece. That's the piece that you have to like really focus on. It could be you enjoy art, or you enjoy dancing, or you enjoy cooking even. It's whatever you enjoy doing, just bring it to a higher place, a higher existence. And that's how I feel like I connect with my spiritual identity. In addition to that, my other message would just be, that you're not judged, and to know that you come from love and that you are love, and to not feel judged about your life or your life choices.
I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Let's make an assumption that a lot of the people, or at least some of the people that read your book, are African American women.
Okay.
So are there takeaways that you would want that group particularly to get from your book?
For African American women, I would just say to be open to the experience of life. Just to be open to the experience of life. Our experiences are unique, but I feel like at the core, we're all one. Find value in all of your experiences, and that's where I'd leave it. Just find the value of in all of your experiences, whether it be positive or negative. Just find the value in your experiences, because all of us have purpose, and all of our experiences are purposeful.
All right, I think that's a good place to leave it. Now, Kamaria, if people want to get a copy of your book, can they order it on Amazon or?
Yeah, so it'll be available on Amazon on June 7th. So definitely look out for that date. June 7th, it'll be on Amazon. If you want an advanced reading copy, you can get it on Lulu right now, lulu.com. And if you want to connect with me, follow my journey. I'm doing a lot more writing and articles, different articles. Follow me on Facebook, WTF Is Enlightenment. Follow me on Instagram, WTF Is Enlightenment. And you can connect with me there and read some more of my writing.
Yeah, I'll put a lot of information about the book and where to reach you in the show notes.
Appreciate that, Angela. Thank you.
Yeah, as I just want to thank you for being on the podcast, Kamaria. What is diversity? What is diversity? What is diversity? What is diversity? What is spirituality?